You know, way back in I think it was 1994, my first teaching assignment, I was assigned an AP Calculus class. Not off the bat, but it was one of the ones in that first year. And it was because I was an engineer and they knew I understood the math. So they put 8 students together from 2 different schools. There were 4 African American students from the Strawberry Mansion area, and there were 4 of my Latinx brothers and sisters that came from a high school on the east side of Broad Street. That meant there was already some cultural differences, some language barriers, some communication differences, and the 2 groups of students, quite frankly, just didn't like each other because they were from 2 different parts of town. Now, I didn't know how to deal with any of that stuff at that time. So what I found was the common ground between them, and it was the math. I was able to use my skills in understanding the math with real world problems from my engineering experiences and ramp the conversations up into real world and real life problems. And we would talk about those problems and kind of debate back and forth. And that was the commonality between the 2 groups of students. That made the content, made the course culturally responsive for the 2 groups of students. But as they were doing the math, the calculus, which I knew they understood the calculus, the processes and the formulas and the things that went along with the calculus, kept getting the problems wrong. So I'm like, why are they getting these answers wrong? So I started looking at the problems in more depth, and I found out that they were horrible, and I mean horrible, at negative numbers and fractions. Now, I didn't know that now, but I know it now. I didn't know it then, excuse me, but I know it now, that whenever you deal with an at-potential population, especially from an SES background, you're going to see some gaps in early math and in early literacy. So I did what I learned in college. My professor said, listen, don't sweat the small stuff when you're dealing with advanced math and advanced physics. You need to focus on the advanced math and advanced physics. So you let the calculator do the small stuff. So I did the same thing for my students. Said, here's some calculators. Let me teach you how to use the calculator to do the negative numbers and the fractions. Well, the students didn't want to do that because the rule in the school was they weren't allowed to use calculators. Not exactly sure where that came from, traditional thinking from somewhere. Well, we used them anyway. Taught them how to use them because you're allowed to use them on the AP exam. And they used those calculators and they started getting answers right. When they saw that they were getting the answers right, their whole level of self-efficacy and their attack on the content was, I mean, like times 10. It was on steroids. They wanted problem after problem. They wanted to just do more and do more because they loved that success experience. So I gave them more. So much so that when it came time to take that exam, 7 out of the 8 students scored a 3 or above on that AP Calculus exam. And the only reason all 8 didn't score 3 or above is because that 8th person didn't show up for the exam. So my point that I'm trying to say to you is, listen, in your classrooms, when you want to make it more culturally responsive from the student standpoint, try to find that one thing that brings common ground between the 2 of them, levels the field. In my case, it was the math, it was the content, it was conversation about that content. And the way we got to that conversation so that it did level the playing ground and become more culturally responsive is I gave them the tool that they needed so that they all had equitable access to mastering the content. And in my case, it was simply a calculator. I gave them a calculator so they can get past the small stuff that they were stuck on, and we could ramp our conversations up into the higher powered math that intrigued them, gave them a success experience, and leveled the playing ground. So if you want to create more culturally responsive classrooms, find that common ground and give them the tools and give them the accommodations they need so you can skip past the small stuff and get to the stuff that really matters. That'll get them engaged and synergize them at the same time.